Hello, welcome to this short explanation of Weberian views of social class inequality. So with social inequality generally, Weber is a structuralist conflict theorist. In other words, he argues that the main determining factor of human behaviour and identity and experience is the wider social structures of society, like social class. And he argues that those structures confine or restrict freedoms and act as kind of social forces influencing the behaviour of individuals. It's a conflict perspective, so Weberianism emphasises the competition between groups and that these can be exploitative in the sense that some groups benefit more from relationships and arrangements and patterns of behaviour and others may lose out more. Weberianism is generally a multi-dimensional view of social inequality. So it looks at a range of issues, not only economic, but also cultural and social and political. However, when we look at social class then, we can say firstly that Weber is described as the ghost of Marx. Because Weber agrees with Marx about the main dimension of social inequality being social class, and being economic, and being property ownership. So Weber agrees with that first point. However, he also looks at other economic dimensions of inequality. He looks at position in the labour market in relation to occupation, income, skills, value of skills, earning power. He looks at other factors like market situation and work situation. So looking at social class, he does look at property and wealth and ownership and relationship to the means of production. But because he looks at the idea of occupation and income, and he talks about the growth of non-manual jobs, he does actually give an explanation for the growth of the middle class, which may be, which is the opposite to what Marx predicted, who predicted the growth of the working class and the decline of the middle class. Weber's explanation relies on the concept of bureaucratization, which is essentially bureaucratization at the end. It's a process by which large-scale organisations are more involved in people's lives and in social life. So bureaucratization involves the development of these large-scale organisations like companies, corporations and businesses. These increasingly large-scale organisations need more non-manual workers to organise, coordinate and manage work that is done. And therefore this naturally leads to the principle of the growth of the non-manual jobs in the labour market, where there will be an increasing need for workers with skills that are non-manual skills, with certain level of educational qualifications. When Weber describes market situation and work situation of workers at different levels of the labour market, he's referring to work and he's referring to market situation in terms of economic conditions. So market situation is to do with the skills held by an individual and their value in the labour market. In other words, how much can they sell their skills for? In other words, a lecturer may have a stronger market situation compared to a cleaner who might have a weaker market situation. Secondly, work situation refers to the conditions of work in the workplace. So this could include the working environment, how pleasant and safe or how dangerous and risky the workplace is. Compare a lecturer with a miner. But it also relates to conditions of work like pensions, company cars and other perks which might come with the job, like free gym membership. So in terms of market situation and work situation and bureaucratization, This process of bureaucratisation creates more non-manual jobs. There'll be more workers with a stronger market situation and work situation. And this is partly because you need to sacrifice your time and time when you could be working to get qualifications for these types of jobs. This leads to class fragmentation, where we have more breaking up of the layers of the class system, or strata of the class system, or breaking up, the blurring of class boundaries, creation of new class strata or groups. With the growth of the middle class and the fragmentation of the system, the growth of the middle class is referred to as embourgeoisement. Okay, embourgeoisment was studied by Goldthorpe. Okay, John Goldthorpe, studying embourgeoisment, Luton car workers study. So embourgeoisment is a process. It's a process of people becoming more wealthy, essentially, or more like the middle class, or perhaps even the upper class. So embourgeoisment might involve changing socially in terms of your relationship to groups like the family and institutions like the family. It might involve political changes in terms of power and influence and attitudes to power and influence. It might involve economic changes in terms of income and wealth and ownership. It might involve changes culturally in terms of attitudes, norms and values and beliefs. And so the Luton car study was trying to establish whether Dahrendorf's principle of embourgeoisment, it was Dahrendorf who came up with the principle of embourgeoisment, whether that was actually taking place. Was there a process of embourgeoisment? And from the study, they were trying to look at people's values, family life, whether they're becoming more career-focused than collective-focused in terms of community relationships. Is their voting behaviour changing in terms of political party allegiance? Are they becoming more privatised in nuclear families? Do they own more things? So it's trying to look at whether they're becoming more middle class in the car workers in this factory. And what it essentially found was that they still had this them and us attitude. They saw themselves as workers and the bosses as the kind of owners and exploiters. They had privatised nuclear family and more wealth and more material possessions, but they still had the idea of community and collective relationships as well. So it's a mixed picture. So it's described as a new working class rather than part of a new middle class. So I've explained several things there. The other concept is that in terms of market situation and work situation, we can generally divide the labour market into two main areas. The primary labour market is the jobs and occupations in the labour market which are most desirable, the best income, best work conditions, and so on. And those are the ones with the strongest market situation and work situation. And then, so a job like a barrister, which is a kind of old middle class job, if you like. That job is older historically, whereas a new middle class job like social worker or teacher is possibly part of the primary labour market. That is changing increasingly as the government squeezes pensions and holidays are starting to be affected. But generally that's probably part of the kind of new middle class jobs, which might be part of the primary labour market but still have a different status within that. Secondary labour market jobs are the less enviable, less desirable jobs. So 0 hours contract work, work that's on low wages, work with a less certain, secure position in the labour market, cleaning, contract-based work may be seen as secondary labour market work. And that's got a less strong market situation and less strong work situation. There's also the process of social closure. So Weber argued that there are processes of social mobility, because there's bureaucratisation, people getting more non-manual work, but also there's processes of social closure, which are the exclusion of membership of groups. And so it could be like the British Medical Council will have certain expectations for people to be qualified and members of the British Medical Council so they can practice as doctors. The Law Society, again, will have certain expectations that its members studied at the bar and so on. And so again, there's process of exclusion if people don't meet certain criteria. Social closure is most focused on the idea of disadvantage and advantage, of unfairness and barriers to opportunities, but also privilege and unfairness based on given more opportunities, especially in terms of social background. So, for example, the civil service in the UK has historically been dominated by white, male, middle class, public school educated people. People from those backgrounds getting more access to civil service, people not from those backgrounds, not from that pool in terms of social background, excluded from the civil service because of the recruitment within those backgrounds. And that's called elite self-recruitment. So it's where people recruit from their own backgrounds rather than from different backgrounds. So it's elite self-recruitment. It acts as a form of social exclusion or social closure. Social class is further complicated and fragmented by the fact that there is status based on age, gender and ethnicity. So your labour market position can be affected by your age. We know that younger people and older people are less active in the economy and have less strong market situation and work situation, more jobs in the secondary labour market. Gender, females again have a less strong market and work situation in the class occupational labour market. So again, secondary labour market jobs, contract, temporary and so on, lower income. We've got the feminisation of poverty. So we've got more females in poverty because of that issue, according to Weberians. Ethnicity, black minority ethnic groups more likely to experience a weaker market situation and work situation. So a weaker position in the labour market, more likely to have secondary labour market work. This becomes further complicated because African Caribbeans, evidence shows, are more upwardly socially mobile compared to Pakistanis and Bangladeshis. Again, the reason for that may be to do with social closure, it may be to do with culture and cultural difference and choices, but the debate on that, it is a debate, there is a discussion of that, and you have to look at the evidence. The Weberians would argue that there may be social closure or an ethnic penalty. People are disadvantaged because of their ethnic background. Okay, so and party, last of all, political status in terms of an interest group that represents you, in terms of power and influence. We could say that different social class groups are definitely influenced by political issues. 42% of MPs attended independent schools. There's only 7% of the population are educated by independent schools. So there's clearly a class difference where fee-paying independent school students have an advantage in moving into politics and gaining influence in the traditional democratic system. But also just generally you can say that there's disadvantages in terms of influence for groups from different social backgrounds. People labelled as underclass, likely to be stigmatised and given less access to power. Members of the working class, again, there's changing, it's fragmenting and blurring, so some of them have more influence and access to power. With that bureaucratisation process, there is access to the working class into the labour market, non-manual work and the political system. But it's not a simple, straightforward issue. It's complicated by cultural and social factors. So I hope this helps. If you have any questions, email daniel_butcher@hotmail.co.uk.